Hello, and welcome to another Core Animator tutorial. In this installment, we're going to take a look at using Core Animator in order to create custom pull-to-refresh controls for table view controllers. We'll be using the technique described in the walk cycle tutorial to take control of the animation timing and sync it with the amount of pull applied to the table view. Let's start by taking a look at the Core Animator projects. As you can see here, our designer has created two animations for us in this Apple project. The first one, the slice, will be used when the user pulls the table view down, and the second one, the spinner, will be used when the table view is refreshing its data. We also have a second project, a balloon spinner with a few additional animations. This one has a pull down animation for when the table view is being pulled down. It has a pop out animation for when the refresh starts, and a spinner animation for when the table view is refreshing its data. So let's take a look at these inside of our Xcode project. We've already exported these files and included them into our Xcode project here, and let's take a look at the main storyboard to see how we're laying out the application. We're just using a navigation controller here with some static cells that'll kick us over to the table view controllers that we want to use. If we take a look at the Apple table view controller, you can see that refreshing is enabled, and this will give us access to the refresh control inside of our code. Both of our view controllers are subclassed from custom refresh table view controller, which simply takes an ordered set of labels and either orders them ascending or descending. If we look at the Apple table view controller itself, we can see that inside of the viewDidLoad method, we're grabbing the refresh control, setting the tint color to clear so that we don't see Apple's default activity indicator, and then adding ourselves as a target for when the refresh event actually kicks off. Here we instantiate our Apple spinner, which is our Core Animator view, set its content mode to aspect fit, and then add it as a subview to the refresher. Here in ScrollViewDidBeginDragging, we override this function and check if the refresh control is already refreshing. If it's not, then we remove the spinner animation if it exists, and here we add the slice animation. Now, just like in the walk cycle tutorial, we're gonna set the begin time to the current media time and the speed to 0. In effect, this pauses the animation and lets us take full control of its timing later. We also update our should update animation time variable in order to decide later whether or not we're actually going to be updating the time. Here in the ScrollViewDidScroll method, we grab our refresher, we find out what our pull amount is in the ratio, and then depending on whether or not we should indeed update the time, and if we have an actual pull amount, we set the time offset on the layer to a value between 0 and 3, which is the length of our animation. And this gives the user control over that pull to refresh animation. Once they do pull it far enough to refresh the table view, then the refresh is going to get called, and we do a few things here. First of all, we set our should update animation time to false so that we no longer update the animation based on the time. We remove the slice animation and we add the spinner animation to the layer. Now that the spinner animation's added to the layer, we want it to just run like it would normally. So we set the speed to 1, the begin time to the current media time, and set the time offset back to 0. We also have added this dispatch after block simply to simulate that a table view is fetching data from something like a web service or some other source. So we're going to let this run for 3 seconds, after which we're going to flip the table view's data, reload it, and then end our refreshing. If we take a look at the balloon table view controller, it's mainly the same. The difference here is inside of the refresh method. Everything you see here is exactly the same, but because there's multiple animations, we're actually going to add the pop-out animation first, and then in its completion block, we're going to remove the pop-out animation and then add the spinner animation. In effect, this lets us chain these animations together, and then just like the other one, we're going to let it refresh for 3 seconds and then end it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Here we have our Apple spinner table view controller labeled 0 through 9. If we pull down, you'll see that this apple begins to separate and peel down. And then once we hit far enough down here, it'll start its refresh. Here we've seen that the labels have been reordered, and again we can do the same thing, pull it down. You'll notice that the user has full control over that animation based on the distance, and then it refreshes when it gets pulled down far enough. If we take a look at the balloon spinner animation, it's very similar. As we pull down, the balloons come together, and then once we reach far enough, we'll pop out and then start spinning. So that's it. With this code here, we've been able to create our own custom pull to refresh animation inside of TableView Controller. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and happy coding.